our economy wasn't getting any better. We'd had huge levels of immigration, so income per head was going down.
Greetings and welcome back to the channel. If for the first time you're coming across my channel, please remember to subscribe. I want to change the pace a little bit today and bring you a little bit politics. This lady behind me here is Liz Truss. She is the shortest serving Prime Minister here in the UK. I think she served for about 6 weeks. So we've never heard her side of the story and what really happened. So since I have about 20%, 15 to 20% of my subscriber is here in the UK, I thought I'll bring you something on the UK. I also want to use the channel in a way where I bring a little bit of politics, a little bit of history, and also a little bit of religion, etc. to give it a good mix. So if you have time, please let's listen.
So the main thing that I wanted to do is that Britain had been through a very long period of stagnation. Our economy wasn't getting any better. We'd had huge levels of immigration, so income per head was going down in our country. And I wanted to turn that around by reducing taxes, or at least not raising taxes, getting on with things like fracking, because our energy prices were so high, it was massively damaging industry. And to me, that was the absolute key to getting our country back on the right track, because what had been happening is that services were getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, the defence budget was getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, because Britain just wasn't earning its way in the world. So that was my number one priority.
And you came up against just impossibility. It was just impossible, barriers and things.
Well, the thing I came up against was a very powerful economic establishment who had essentially been the architects of the policy for the last 30 years and basically believed that if you keep putting taxes up, it will keep generating more revenue. They don't believe in the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve is the idea that if you put taxes up too much, people will just stop doing things. They'll start moving out of the country. They'll locate their business elsewhere. So they didn't believe in the Laffer curve. And what had also happened is huge amounts of money had been printed, particularly after the financial crisis, but also after COVID, which had created an inflationary cycle. So I was faced with a group of people who did not share my fundamental economic beliefs, which is a belief in free market economics, supply side reform, cheap energy. I think cheap energy is an absolutely vital part of having a fast growing economy. And they essentially undermined what I was trying to do.
Does that suggest we don't actually have a democracy because you elect a party and because they say they want to implement certain things, and then there are these unelected?
Before I proceed, this is something I suggested before or talked about before, about the country not being a democracy. You think you choose the government, but you don't.
People who are in there stopping anything actually happening.
I think Britain has become less democratic, yes. I think that there is less power vested in Parliament than there used to be, which is of course the centre of democracy, and there's a lot more power vested in quangos like the Bank of England or the Migration Advisory Committee or the Climate Change Committee. There's more power vested in the bureaucracy itself. So one of the things Gordon Brown did is he put the Civil Service Code into law in the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act, making it much harder to fire civil servants, much harder to challenge civil servants. So over time, we've gone from a situation where the Parliament was sovereign, the Prime Minister had freedom of action. Of course, a Prime Minister could be removed by their MPs, but they had freedom of action, to a situation now where politicians are operating in a very tight space. And that also includes with respect to the law. So decisions now are judicially reviewed on a regular basis. So, the recent case where Gazan immigrants are now allowed to go through the UK, through the Ukrainian scheme to the UK, that has been allowed by the judiciary. Not a single politician made that decision. So decisions that used to be the purview of elected politicians.
So, according to her, and this is just my understanding, you can put your understanding in the comments. It is alright to have the Ukraine policy where people just come in, but the Gazan shouldn't be able to use that policy. You see, this can be very, very biased, if that's what she's saying. So let's continue to listen.
It's now sit in the hands of the judiciary, the bureaucracy, the quangocracy, and I think that isn't democratic.
That's Islam and Islamism. And I think finally we're allowed to sort of talk about it. There seemed to be a 10-year period where we couldn't, and it was you're racist if you talk about it. What can people do if they, other than vote, what can they do to...
Before she answers, I'm going to cut in here as well. This is also something that is serious, because some of these people are looking at the problem and not looking at the solution, and also not looking at what caused the problem. The cause of the migration, in my opinion, is Britain and America and their coalition went and destabilized many of these countries where these immigrants are coming from. So you create a problem and now that it's affecting you. What is the solution? I believe, in my opinion, the solution is to leave other people countries alone so that they can actually, if you want, help them to stabilize so that they will stay where they are.
Try and change this and make their country, have some acceptable immigration, but not have it completely changing the way it is.
So they do need to vote. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to change under this government.
Nothing is going to change.
I can guarantee that.
So what, 4 more years? Is it?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. Unless there's such a dire crisis that even Labour MPs decide to vote the government out. But I don't think that's very likely. I think they've got enough buffer. There's over 400 of them. They've got enough buffer. But not only do we need a new set of MPs voted in, those MPs have to be prepared to reverse what is 40 or 50 years of law.
Wow.
I was looking at that as well. I was watching the news the other day and I saw Nick Clegg, and I also saw somebody called Miliband as still holding political posts in this government, a person like the Milibands. I've been here for over 20 years. You need new people with new ideas. You can't keep those same people, because the ideas, whether when the government go out and the government come back, is the same. Well, listen.
Most of the major laws passed for the last 40 or 50 years.
So what are some of the, or what is like the main law, or one of the main laws they have to...
So one is the Human Rights Act. And this is the act that's being used. So even if an illegal immigrant has committed a crime, they won't be deported because of their human rights. So the Human Rights Act has to go, and we have to leave the European Convention of Human Rights. Both of those things have to happen. But also, the Constitution Reform Act 2005 has to be reversed, which will help make judges more accountable. So there's two separate problems. One is the law is wrong, but the other problem is that judges are now taking decisions that should be in the purview of politicians. And this was Tony Blair. Back in 2005, he created the Supreme Court, which had never existed in Britain before. He also took the power away from the Lord Chancellor to appoint judges.
Okay.
And I think this has been very important in terms of, we now see a judiciary that is essentially self-appointed. They're not, the senior judiciary are no longer appointed by somebody in the cabinet. And I think that has broken the accountability in the system. So I think those are the two of the laws that need to be reversed. But, in order to really do it, you need to reverse the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act which was passed, I think, in 2010 by Gordon Brown, which is the thing that puts the civil service code into law, because I think you actually need to be able to appoint senior civil servants who are willing to enact the policies, like what happens in America. So this is what I'm saying. In order to just fix that problem about immigration and dealing with illegal immigration, I've just mentioned 3 laws that need to be repealed. It's more than that. We could just spend the next hour talking about the laws that need to be repealed.
Do you think there's something inherent to the type of person who wants to become a civil servant that makes them likely to be maybe a bit of a box ticker and not to really think about the controversial issues?
I wouldn't put it like that. I think the civil service was conceived, back in the 19th century. It was the Northcote-Trevelyan report that came up with the idea of an impartial civil service. And the idea was to stop corruption. But what has happened is, over time, the civil service and the bureaucracy has accreted more and more power. And now they have either become a blocker to doing things, or they're positively advocating a negative agenda, whether it's Islamism, and there's evidence of that happening in the Home Office, whether it's environmental extremism, whether it's transgender ideology. So I think over time, the institutions have got captured by some of these extreme ideologies as well. I don't think it's about the character of the individuals. I've met good civil servants, I've met bad civil servants. The problem is they're just not accountable. And if the public can't kick out the people at the election who make the key decisions, then that's not democracy. That's the issue.
Sure.
So it's
I agree with that
not
one.
a character assassination of any given person. It's saying that we've got a system problem here.
Do we also have, as I think you alluded to a little bit, an infiltration of maybe Islamism? I mean, we had recently somebody talking about blasphemy laws, and Keir Starmer just nodding along. We had somebody saying defending first the cousin marriage, and this is the UK. Do we have that? Has there been an infiltration, like in Iran, like in Lebanon?
Well, there definitely is. Ideological. There's an ideological war going on here, and that is being openly pursued by some people, such as the 4 Islamic separatist MPs that were elected at the election. They've been open. They've said, we want Sharia law in Britain. We want Israel eradicated. But there has also been a more covert operation of saying to people, you can't really talk about this. If you say that these grooming gangs are primarily Muslim, you will be branded a racist. We don't really want to highlight that. We don't really want to go after these cases. So I think there's a combination of an ideological battle, a fear of being seen as racist. There's also an element of political expediency, of people wanting to get the Muslim vote and being concerned if they are speaking out against these issues. And then there is there's an infiltration of institutions as well. So all of these things are true.
Was that ever something that came up in meetings while you were PM? Were there people even from other countries, other prime ministers and things saying like, gosh, you've got a bit of an issue in the UK?
There were concerns about some schools. There were concerns about with what the Home Office was doing. If you remember, there's a big row over the Trojan horse issue. And we worked very hard to push back against any schools where we thought that type of infiltration was going on, or that miseducation was going on. I then went to work in a bunch of jobs that had nothing to do with it, frankly. So Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Trade, Foreign Affairs, and you just naturally spend your time talking about quotas of beef, or what the rules are going to be on products of origin. So you're not and I think this is the other thing about government, is partly because the system is so difficult to navigate. If you're in a ministerial job, you have to spend 100% of your time playing a game of whack-a-mole to get the stuff you're trying to do through. You don't really have the broader vision of what's going on elsewhere. But I remember when the documentary came out on the BBC, Three Girls, and being absolutely shocked about what was happening with the grooming gangs. I think it was in Rotherham, and there'd been no awareness across. Just as a regular cabinet minister, we'd not been talking about it. We didn't know about it. It was not discussed. And at the time, I thought, this issue's being dealt with. This has now been exposed. These people are being brought to justice. We saw prosecutions taking place. But I always felt that it wasn't just the perpetrators who need to be brought to justice. It was the councils who had been complicit. It was the police officers who hadn't done enough. And it was even clear then that they hadn't done enough. And so it was something that I always felt there needed to be more to be done. I was shocked when this year attention was brought again to the issue, and the fact it was still going on. That's what really shocked me, that even though this whole issue had been exposed back in 2017, 2018, the police forces, the Home Office, the councils still had not. Problems we've got in British government is just the lack of information and information sharing. I'd love to have a Elon Musk style, raid on the payment systems of each department, because that's just information that doesn't typically go to ministers at the moment.
It's crazy to me that you were Prime Minister and so nobody came to you and said, listen, these...
I wasn't Prime Minister for very long, I point out.
But sure, but even in weeks and weeks, you'd think someone would come to you and say, listen, we've got this grooming stuff going on.
Well, you would have thought that I would have thought that it would have been dealt with back in 2017, 2018, but it certainly did not come across my desk at all.
The idea that we don't have a bit of an immigration problem seems mad. Is there also this situation that we've got an aging population, so we have to have a lot of immigrants to support that for a workforce to support older people who are not working anymore, and where do you get them from? And that's why we have this immigration situation.
I will also interject here. It's not just that the population is aging. There is a situation where the population is not producing to balance out the childbirth rate, the birth rate. So in average, and this is just a rough check, to keep the population afloat, you should have, according to a research I check, or a video I watch, or something like that, is about 3.5, say 3 kids or 4 kids then. But majority of the female in this country is not having that amount of kids. So that's why the population is going down instead of up or in line.
Well, it's certainly, we started off talking about the Treasury and the Bank of England and their worldview. And that is their worldview. Their worldview is Britain can't really get more productive. It doesn't really matter if tax rates are high. It's not going to affect what people do. And the only way that we can shore up the economy is by importing more people. Now, what's been shown is not only does that make everybody in Britain worse off, because the GDP per capita is going down, even if the overall GDP is going up, the amount per head is going down, but even the GDP is not being...
And also I believe that any society, or in every society, it's like a pyramid, even with life. If Britain went to its peak, in my opinion, and I keep saying my opinion because it is my opinion, you can think different. I believe Britain went to its peak and now it's on the downside. So it's already peak, and the only way after your peak is down.
By immigration overall, because lots of people have been brought in who don't work or who are low skilled. So it's definitely the way the economic models work that are produced by the Office of Budget Responsibility and the Treasury and the Bank of England. That is their belief system, but I believe it is wrong. and they set that belief system and those models independently of political judgment. And that is a huge problem, because if a future government comes in and says, we want to drastically reduce immigration, the Treasury will say, or the OBR will say, okay, there's less money to spend on the health service. Even though they're wrong, their model prevails.
Maybe support the mega rich who maybe want their services to be cheaper if immigrants come in and maybe work for less money.
I think that may or may not be true to some extent, but I think it's been driven by partly by short-termist Treasury economics, which haven't proved to be true. They've proved to be the opposite. We've had 30 years of stagnation, which is the thing that I was trying to solve. But it's also driven by this globalist philosophy of we should care equally about any human being, regardless of whether they're from Afghanistan, Somalia, or Britain. Now, I believe it's the British government's job to look after British people, not to worry about everybody in the world. But if you look at, Keir Starmer and his sort of human rights lawyer approach to the world, he and his friend Irma spent all.
Just to clarify, I believe different. I believe everything is a ripple effect. It bounce back. Whatever you do here, whether you're looking after your people and neglect others or affect others, it will come back and affect you.
Time working for people, organisations outside the UK, because that is their belief. They don't believe that their main job is looking after British people. They believe their job is giving reparations to the Caribbean, or worrying about the human rights.
And they should, because this is one another thing that I disagree with her. I could see why she wasn't Prime Minister for too long, because I also believe that reparations should be paid, and paid very soon, because people like these who is benefited from our bondage, and we work for over 400 plus years for free, and no, you should give back at least some of it. Imagine going to your work. Most of us that is working get a monthly wage. Imagine going to your work for a year without no wage. Then now imagine 400 years with no wage. Imagine the profit that was accumulated by these people who don't want to know.
People in Afghanistan, and that is they're just completely disjointed from what most people in Britain actually think.
More people in from those places who have unfavourable views of Jews than we actually have Jews already in the country each year. This is really scary. Can you see any way that this doesn't continue to become scarier, that we don't end up like Lebanon and Iran having Sharia law?
Well, I think that unless something is done about the situation we're in now, things could easily get worse. I think they could, and the only
it's true.
The only way I see that this problem can be fixed is electing a government with a different point of view, with not the human rights lawyer, we care about the world's population, we don't particularly care about what happens in Britain view, which is the Keir Starmer view. There has to be a government elected that takes the other view, but they also have to change the wiring of the British state.
That's where I agree with her. I don't agree about electing another government, because it's two sides of the same coins. What I agree with her on is the system itself. I also believe that once you win an election where you say the people voted for you, you shouldn't need to go to the palace for someone to give you permission to form a government. And that's just also my belief.
British state, and Tony Blair was the main architect of all this, the Human Rights Act, the Constitutional Reform Act. The architecture of the British state is very much the Keir Starmer worldview. So it's not good enough just to even elect a prime minister who wants to change things. You've actually got to undo all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's what's created the problem.
That one.
How did this Blairism seem to infect the Tories for so many years?
So if you remember back in 2005 when David Cameron got elected as leader of the Conservative Party, lots of Conservatives were talking about the heir to Blair. You know, Cameron did a trip to the Arctic to show he cared about climate change. He hugged a hoodie. You know, he did all this stuff, and it was, you know, it was all about they wanted to be like Blair. They thought that Blair had moved the political landscape. And you know, all of those people, the Danny Finkelsteins, the Michael Goves, the George Osbornes, they wanted to be like Blair. They called Blair the master, and that was the only way they thought they could win the 2010 election. Now, I also think that Conservatives didn't really fully understand what Blair was doing with the sort of constitutional tinkering I've talked about, you know, empowering the legal system, empowering judges, empowering human rights lawyers, you know, taking power away on economic decisions. So what happened with the Bank of England being made independent? What happened with the civil service being... I don't think they fully understood how radical Blair had been.
Do you think Blair fully understood that?
Yes.
He's quite smart.
He is quite clever, yeah.
He's a good speaker. That's why people wanted to emulate him. He's a very good speaker.
He's
quite good looking.
He's very clever.
He's got the look.
He's very clever. There's no doubt about that. It's not just about what is said. And in fact, Trump didn't say a lot of this stuff in the run-up to the election. He talked about Elon Musk, he talked about Doge. But these executive orders, you know, some of them were a surprise. I didn't know the Gulf of Mexico was going to be renamed the Gulf of the US. Did you?
No, I didn't.
You know, I didn't realise that, you know, Canada was going to become the 51st. You know,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of stuff.
In my opinion, on the Gulf of Mexico, I think it's actually the Gulf of America, but not the Gulf of the United States of America as a state. It's the Gulf of America, which is the whole region, which is the South America, North America, Central America, including Mexico, all that area there. So it's in theory, it's the Gulf of America for real, but it's not the Gulf of the United States. Everybody, when you say America, most people believe you're just talking about the United States. America is a big place. You have North America, South America, Central America. So, yeah, let me not stretch it out.
That was being planned, clearly, very, very, you know, in a very detailed way, that wasn't said. And I think Britain does need an understanding about how bad the problem is and how broken the system is. Because I think that a government getting in 2029 has to have a mandate to completely change things in the way that Millet got the mandate. But does it mean that every single thing needs to be spelled out? Probably not.
Do you think?
And that's a balance any politician has got to strike. Who go into government, say they're going to sort these things out, and don't actually do it. So, you know, in terms of Kemi Badenoch, she needs to actually say that she's prepared to reverse all of these Blair laws. Because unless you're prepared to reverse the Blair laws, nothing is going to change about this country.
And I think she came across as not necessarily weak, but not strong on those points on Trigonometry's podcast recently. You know, she didn't really want to.
I'm amazed you're watching another of these podcasts.
I would never watch another one.
Well, I'm watching his podcast.
And
want to create a podcast.
Because we've got a 20-second advert. That would cost thousands for them to advertise on here. And they've got it now. I love them. And, you know, we'll see them later. We're going to be at an event.
We are.
So that'll be lovely. We'll all have a drink. But, yeah, Kemi, I think, was a little bit flim-flammy on that. And people want to see her go in strong.
I think there is a real mood for change in this country. And if you think about it, people voted for huge change in 2016 when they voted for Brexit. They voted for change again in 2019 when they voted for Boris. They even thought Keir Starmer was capable of changing things. I could have told them otherwise, but people in hope.
He is changing things. The censorship online, blaming Amazon.
Well, the censorship online, I'm afraid it was the Conservatives who put through the online harms bill.
He should pay attention to the farmers and do something about it. That's what I believe.
So
That's true, but he's pushing for more, though, isn't he? That's his
true.
rhetoric.
He's definitely a worse version. I think we can agree he's worse. I think we can. He's accelerating towards the cliff edge rather than just ambling towards the cliff edge. But the fact is, the country's been headed towards the cliff edge for some time, and he is accelerating that pathway. But I think the country is beginning to understand just how serious the situation is. I think the rise of Islam and Islamism is a major issue. The economic crisis that we're facing, the energy crisis we're facing, the fact that not only do we have the highest energy prices in the developed world, our industry is closing down, our steel industry has now been decimated. We've also got the potential for blackouts, and very seriously.
And she said that about a month ago, and we had a recent incident in at Heathrow, at one of those airports recently, and there was a complete blackout on that side of the city. So these things can happen, and this is one of the reasons why I always I have a few videos on how to prepare for disaster. You can't sit down every time and rely on the system to work and for nothing to go wrong. Just imagine for a moment that the electric goes off for 1 week. How do you survive? So I would advise you, go and watch my disaster preparedness video.
Energy grid is in a serious state. So I think people really understand the level of the crisis. One of the things I'm trying to communicate is what actually needs to be done to fix it, and how the structural problems have contributed to why we're in the mess we're in. So
that was weird.
I think the way
they asked climate change, talking about climate change, and the break just now, both advert was on climate change. I thought that was strange.
The climate change legislation's worked, which is very kind of top-down state control, has been a disaster because it's just made energy prices incredibly high and energy unreliable in this country. So the way we've done it is bad. The way we should have addressed environmental issues is through use of better technology. But even if it was the right thing to do, nobody else is doing it. China's not doing it. They're building huge, they are building coal-fired power stations, which they are using to power solar panel production to send to Britain. So it's just, it's absolutely nuts. In America, they are fracking gas, which they are then liquefying to like 180 degrees C, taking it across the Atlantic, regasifying it here in Britain, even though we could have been fracking ourselves in Britain and had that cheap gas straight off. So the policy is obviously not working. Industry, things like AI require vast amounts of energy. We have the highest energy prices. How on earth are we going to attract those industries to Britain? So I think it doesn't work on the basic level. I think that the climate change hysteria was way overdone, but it also just doesn't work. If you compare Britain to America, America's been fracking. They've got much cheaper energy prices. Their industry is booming. The average American is now $34,000 better off than the average Brit. We are poorer.
I can't believe
we are poorer per head than the state of Mississippi, which is the most poor state in the United States.
That's insane.
So, why are we self-flagellating with this net?
I've not seen the research, but I don't think I believe that. And the reason I said that is, if the country is so poor, then why is the pound more than the dollar? If someone could break that down for me, because I do not understand it. That's one of the things I do not understand.
It's that experience that really demonstrated to me how broken the British state was, because I'd been a minister in other departments, I'd had those battles, but I hadn't realised that even at the top, you can't actually pull the levers. And that to me shows something drastic needs to change. We need to get 350 MPs of sound mind who are committed, who are prepared to change the way the state works.
It's so sad that you got to that pinnacle and then still realised you couldn't actually affect change.
You might say it's sad, but isn't it better that I know that now?
But it's sad that it's better that you know.
It's exactly what I've been telling you, that it don't matter which party win. It is both two sides of the same coin.
Sad thing.
Because otherwise, what would be happening is we went, let's say I didn't exist, and we just gone from Boris Johnson to Rishi Sunak to Keir Starmer, and then we'd just think, well, Rishi Sunak wasn't any good, Keir Starmer's not any good, that's the problem. What I'm trying to do is expose the fact the problem is a lot deeper than that. It's not just that these people are incompetent or insufficiently conservative or human rights lawyers who don't care about Britain. There's actually another problem here, which is the state doesn't work.
Yeah,
can't change it.
It's very sad. And
deep stuff. If you really listen to what she's saying, deep stuff. That's what I believe.
Level for you.
Well, it's sad, but it's sad, but there is something we can do about it.
Yeah. I'm a negative person.
You are very negative, but it would be sad if Britain had been nuked and there's nothing we could do about it and it was a wasteland. But that's not. I think we're a great country. I think if you look at what we have given the world, from the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, to freedom of speech, the Industrial Revolution, we are a great country. Yes, it is sad that we're not doing that well at the moment, but it is fixable. The country is not on the right trajectory. It's going in a completely wrong direction.
So, if you want to watch the whole video, because I'm going to break this up into pieces, is the name of the program is there, and it's Liz Truss. I'll probably put the link in the description box so you can click on it and watch it. Watch the whole video. It's like almost an hour. So, thank you for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe, and comment, and have a wonderful day.
The left or the satirists, whatever, is they are now the establishment in Britain. They have this establishment kind of sneery view of the world. The country is not on the right trajectory. It's going in a completely wrong direction. And yet, what they want to do is try and take apart anybody that tries to fix it. Yeah. So this is why I'm not interested in what they've got to say.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Because I know who they are. They are part of the problem.
Someone like, the Starmer, of course, and what do you think about, Peter Hitchens was saying Starmer's actually further left of Corbyn?
I don't think that's true, particularly.
Yeah, Corbyn's pretty
I think Starmer is, he's actually, if you look at what Blair tried to do with the Constitution, creation of the Supreme Court, veneration of human rights, Starmer was part of that in the 90s. That he's a kind of continuum of that sort of philosophy.
With less charisma.
Yeah. True.
Just nothing.
But I think, I don't know if Corbyn's more of a Democrat, but I think, like, Starmer's a believer in the technocracy. He believes lawyers know best, technocrats know best, the people don't know best. Whereas I think, funnily enough, I think Corbyn's actually more of a populist.
Yeah. No, I think that sounds about right, actually. Do the royals have any sway? Was Queen Elizabeth II saying anything to you like, look, just make sure to sort out this migrant problem?
Well, they have. I can't go into my final audience, but she was very across every issue of facing Britain. It's fair to say, but they are there to have audiences give advice, but I wouldn't overstate it. I mean, this in terms of who runs Britain, it's the unelected bureaucracy that have far more influence.
Yeah, I can imagine that. The moment that you would have to step down, how did that feel for you emotionally as a human?
I was very so I'm somebody who I'm a very positive person, as discussed, and I wanted to get things on the right trajectory. So when I was forced to reverse the policies, which I absolutely hated doing, and I only did it because it was a gun to my head. I was literally threatened.
Literally threatened.
With that not with a gun.
Metaphorically with a gun.
It was a metaphorical gun.
Putting it in the trailer. I was literally threatened with a gun.
I was threatened with a gun. That's it. But the point is, there's a gun put in my head saying, if I didn't reverse these policies, they feared that we would not be able to fund our debt. So we'd have been in an IMF-style 1976 crisis. Now, I believe this was manufactured, i.e. by the sort of the economic establishment, the chattering classes, etc. But nevertheless, I thought it was a genuine threat. And it was at that point when I'd gone into politics, I'd run to be Prime Minister because I wanted to change things. I didn't want to be there as some kind of patsy of the bureaucracy just spouting out what they told me to say. So by that point, I already felt, I was in a very difficult position. And that's why I had to go.
And how does that feel?
Bad. It felt bad. It was very, It was very, I think it was upsetting on two levels. One is obviously just losing the job, very upsetting. But also just, I had believed that I could change things within the system that we had. So I'd spent my political career, we wrote a book back in 2012 called Britannia Unchained about what needed to happen to make our country great again. I'd risen up through the ministerial ranks, I'd done the trade deals, so I believed that things could be changed by getting into that job. So I was also, maybe this is back to your point about being sad, I was sad that that was not possible, and that things that I thought were difficulties that had to be overcome were actually insurmountable blocks that needed to be dynamited.
Was your husband a great strength in that moment for you?
He was, yeah, and he said that this is back when I ran for the leadership. He said, you do realise it's just going to be massively difficult and a massive load of trouble. So he sort of predicted it. Now I'm on the optimistic side. He's a bit more. Yeah, but
he's more like
if you're not optimistic, you never go for these things.
Yeah, you have to be.
You have to be.
Yeah. Are you a crier?
Yeah, like a bit of a crier. I cry. I'm not like a pathological crier.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine not in a sort of psychopathic, tell me about your tears, but just trying to understand the human, because we don't with politicians, even more than footballers who are throwing tomatoes at and things. I think with politicians it's very much like, look at especially look, sometimes they bring it on themselves because they do act like these sort of robots, but I don't think you do.
But the thing about the robot thing is that when you're a government minister, you have to follow the line of collective responsibility. And that is just very difficult because you're constantly self-checking. Like, have I said something that's gone beyond this line, gone beyond that line? So that is where the robot thing comes from quite a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there are other people, I guess, who just don't know anything, so they have to be robots because they're just reciting stuff. But I think a lot of it is, and I think that there is a ludicrous amount of focus on politicians who don't necessarily have that much power. Like, why is the Bank of England not being properly scrutinised for printing vast amounts of money, creating a huge wave of inflation? They've only got one job, which is to control inflation, and they failed at it. Oh, actually, there are other jobs, financial stability, and they failed at that in 2022. There's no kind of worrying about, Andrew Bailey and is he wooden or whatever, or has he done a bad interview? So this is all part of a symptom of a system that doesn't work, and politicians get treated a bit as panto characters. The thing about it was Andrew Gwynn and the WhatsApp group, and isn't he awful? Throw him off stage, and that's the way it's treated. And I find that very depressing, because not because I'm a fan of his, but because there's serious things wrong with our country. We're talking about the fact there are people trying to impose Sharia law in our country. We're poorer than Mississippi. We might have energy blackouts, and yet so much of the mainstream media is just dominated by what is basically panto.
That does seem to be the case, and you're absolutely right. These are the issues, and I get very frustrated because the criticism labelled at me is that, oh, these.
You see, you shouldn't go searching for yourself on the internet. Is what the.
I love the singer.
Now we found out what the problem is.
I love the singer Andrew Gold. It was from the 80s. Did you know he had some pop songs? It was his same name as mine, and so
I know that one, Gold by Spandau Ballet.
The people sing that at me. Gold, always believe in yourself. I get all the time. So people sing, and they sing Andrew Gold's songs as well. He's the guy with my name, but he died.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, his widow contacted me. He was quite a big name, and he worked with the Beatles and people like that. And his widow got in touch, just saying hello. I see you have my my husband. Is it a widow as well? A man? Yeah, my widow's name. Nice to meet you. I said, oh, hello, and that was that. It was a weird thing about this sort of nominative determinism. But yeah, people label that criticism at me in this podcast. It's a distraction. The culture wars. Oh, it's all just a bit of a distraction because they don't really want to face the facts that this is about, as you say.
It's civilizational. It's civilizational.
Yeah. It's really scary, and we're getting just people taking silly pops at you and pantomime and the whole the politics of it all. It's just mad. So I don't know. I've got another question for you, but first, tell me a little bit about your book and also anything, where people can follow you on Twitter and all those kinds of things.
So my book is called 10 Years to Save the West. I've just brought out an edition with 2 new chapters, which covers the whole issue of the general election. My Twitter is TrustLiz, and people can follow me on that.
Oh, I hope they do. I'll put the links down below.
Very good.
And your book is I was saying to you before, it's just so readable, and it's a real person that is writing it, which is you. It's not ghostwritten, is it?
No.
So I encourage people to go and get hold of that. And who's a heretic you admire?
I guess a heretic. Well, it is. I mean, it's Trump and Millet are the 2 heretics that I think are actually taking it on, and I think, particularly with Trump, he's refused to be sort of beaten down by an entire establishment that was against him.
Have you met Trump?
Yes.
How was that?
Very good. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Did you have nice when you get to meet people like that? Is it like a nice casual chat? Like, how you doing, mate? Oh,
It's always about politics. When you meet other politicians, it's always about
thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe and have a wonderful day. And catch you in the next one. According to the thing, people are not subscribed. Please subscribe. And the subscription is